Hey, GERO200, this is our last video. So yes, if you're watching this, we really appreciate the fact that you took this class in the summer. It's pretty fast paced. You have a lot of stuff going on in the summer and you're almost done. So hang in there.
But you did it.
You did it. And you should pat yourselves on the back. So this is week 14. We're talking about estate planning and long-term care. Very important issues. You will almost certainly have to deal with these types of issues in your own lives and dealing with your parents and your grandparents and your older relatives. So this is very practical and something that John and I have been through with our families. So we have some wisdom to impart to you.
It's about the money.
The money, yes, the money. So your last discussion and quiz are due the last day of class, which is Friday, John's birthday, June 30th.
You know, I'm celebrating for my birthday. I'm just going to tear out. See that big lump? Oh, no, I tore my bicep or something like that. I don't know. It's just gone.
Dr. Walsh is going to see a good doctor at UCI on Tuesday. We're going to see if they can patch him up a little bit.
That's what happens when you're an athlete, for my athletes in the class.
Yes. Injuries are hard. Midterm 2 is open till the last day of class. We have extra credit, so do not panic if your grade isn't as good as you want it to be. We have to turn grades in. We're under a pretty strict deadline from the registrar. So if you want to turn in the extra credit over the weekend, I can handle that because the class isn't huge. Just, let me know. Remind me.
So. What else is due? Don't forget, you have one last really big assignment. Sorry, it's
the final interview paper. Yeah. We love this paper. It's probably my favorite assignment in any class. I literally will laugh and cry when I'm reading them, and we appreciate the fact that your neighbors and friends and family are sharing their lives with us.
And don't forget to get out your phone, okay, and actually do a recording if you're blessed enough to record from your parents or your grandparents,
for your own personal
use. Posterity. It's amazing, and they'll give you insight. It's just like, we all did it where we sit down with grandma and grandpa every Christmas and go, "Hi, grandma, how you doing? Okay, good. Okay, bye." And then this is a chance to actually get to know them on a whole different level, and you'll be amazed about some of the really cool stuff you're going to find out. So
yeah,
anyways, you're going to save it.
Turn my phone off.
Okay.
And So anyway, so where was I? Yes. So the paper, we're not strict about length, 10 pages, more or less, 10 references.
Citations.
10 references outside the class. Cite your references in the text. So you'll be talking about diabetes, and then you'll have in parentheses the American Diabetes Association.
It is all laid out.
I'll send an email out just kind of telling you where people usually lose points.
Follow the rubric.
Yeah. So 10 references, cite them in the text.
Here's some questions that people ask, and then this is really some directions. We give you a set of questions. You can come up with your own. It's okay. We give you these questions, and then you just apply what you've learned in class to the response.
Yeah. And this is not a writing class, so don't worry too much about, is this my classic writing 340 assignment? We don't care about that.
It is a plagiarism class, though.
It is a plagiarism class. Don't plagiarize. We do care about that.
We had somebody once that submitted somebody else's paper, and they were so bad about it, they didn't even take the other person's name off of it.
Don't do that.
Guess what? It was 100% overlap.
Don't do that. Yes, if you have any trouble submitting it to turn it in, you can email it to me and I'll submit it for you. Okay. So that's about everything we wanted to talk about in terms of assignments that are due.
All the way down.
Let's go into assignment 14. There you go. I want to talk about estate planning first. We have two articles. One's from the American Bar Association. So that's the lawyer group. They're very pro-lawyer. And then the other one's from the AARP, which is, I think it's, what is it? The American Association for Retired People.
Persons.
Okay. Persons. Okay.
I think.
So anyway, and so that one's a little more user-friendly. But we'll start with the ABA. So what most lawyers will say is you need to have a lawyer to draft your estate plan because it is complicated and you've got issues of tax and state law and
this
things
is how
like
I make my money.
However, the problem I see is that a lot of people don't have a will or a trust or any sort of estate planning done because they have this hurdle of I've got to get the money to pay for a lawyer. I've got to find a lawyer I trust. I've got to find time to do it. And so my advice and what we'll talk about today is rather than having no will and no trust, if you can't get to a lawyer and you can't afford the couple $1,000s it might take to develop your estate plan, then go to Costco and buy the software or go online and figure out a free or low cost option to just put together a will. It is important for a lot of reasons, which we'll talk about. If you die without a will, that's called dying intestate. Okay, if you die without a will, who gets to decide who gets your assets? The government does. Do you trust the government to have the right, to make the right calls? Probably not. Every state will have some slightly different order of priorities. So the state might say that your children or your wife would get the estate. The state might say, well, hey, if you were single and you didn't have kids, that your siblings might get the estate or your parents might get the estate. And so there will be this order of priority of who gets the money. Now, you might be in a situation like I have a complicated family. And
I love that word, complicated.
yes, I have a complicated family. If I didn't have kids, I don't want my brother and sister getting my assets. I want John's brothers, who've been really good to me for 40 years that I've known them, that we're really close to. I would want his brothers to get my assets, and the state wouldn't do that. So we have a will and a trust that we put together that carries out our wishes. And we do have two sons, so they are getting our assets.
So all the state understands is who's most genetically close to you at the time
and life is
when you die.
Life is more complicated than that.
Genetics.
So yeah, we have a logical family and we have our genetic family, and sometimes they're not always the same. So anyway, it can get complicated if you don't have a will. For example, when Prince, the musician, died, there were something like 29 claims against his estate. He didn't have children, I don't think, but there were people that said that they were his kids. Of course, DNA testing ended up ruling them out. There were people that said, well, I met him in a bar and he said he wanted to give me his entire music catalog. Weird people would pop up because there's a lot of money and a lot of assets at stake. And he was, relatively young when he passed, so he just didn't have the estate plan. Aretha Franklin passed when she was a lot older and had health issues, but she was another person that didn't want to think about her estate plan, so she died without a will, and it's the same thing. And you know who else gets your money when you die without a will? Lawyers get your money, because you're going to have to go into court, your family's going to have to go into court, and even if everyone agrees about who should get your assets, you're going to have to pay a lawyer to go into court and open probate and get court approval, and it requires a lot of oversight from the courts. It'll slow things down, and it's just not pretty.
Here's that word, beneficiary. So Julie's going to talk about going to every single aspect of your estate, all your different accounts, and list somebody as the beneficiary, so the assets or the money transfers automatically.
Yes. So if you do have a will, then you can say, you can have, our will is pretty simple because we have a trust. We divide all of our assets 50-50 between our two.
Use two words there, maybe. Yeah, our will is simple because we have a trust. So you're going to have to help people understand what that means.
I will do that.
Okay.
We got time.
All right.
I'm not done yet. So in most cases, let's say, in our case, we have two children, so everything's divided 50-50. They are the beneficiaries of our will, and they are the beneficiaries of our trust. So they are the people who will inherit our property when we're gone. You can also do other things that are really important with a will. Let's say you don't have a lot of assets, but you have children. In your will, you can name who you want to be guardian for your children. And that's really important because a court will look at that and say, okay, you, while you were mentally competent, chose someone that you felt had the same values in terms of child raising and, whatever. Someone that was trustworthy for you. And so you've named them as guardian for your kids. So it's really important. You can also leave specific bequests. So when my dad passed away, he grew up on a farm and he was an outdoorsy kind of guy. He had a pretty big gun collection. And he left it to his grandson, my nephew. because they had spent a lot of time together and they hunted together and did all that stuff. And so he left a specific bequest to my nephew, and then he left his watch to my older son. And so you can do that kind of thing too. You can leave specific property to specific people. You can give money to charity. You can give money to USC. They're always hopeful. But you've already given a lot of money to USC by paying tuition,
Yes,
so
you have.
I don't necessarily recommend it,
Oh,
but
but you can
anyway,
be part of the family.
yeah. So anyway, you also choose who's going to be the person handling your estate when you die, and that person's called the executor. And I'm the executor for my dad's estate. I was the youngest child, so a lot of times people say, oh, well, I'll just have the oldest child do it. But in my family, my sister and my brother both have had financial problems in the past, so they weren't good choices. And both of them didn't get along with my stepmom. And so my dad was like, okay, when he had to sit down with a lawyer and draft his will, he said, okay, I can't. My sister actually made a death threat against my against my stepmom, and her psychiatrist had to report it, and it was ugly. So he was like, "Well, she's off the list." And then my brother has a lot of financial problems, and we don't really know what's going on, but probably drug or alcohol or gambling issues. And so he's off the list. And so he had one kid left. That was me. And I'm financially stable, and I'm an attorney, and I teach about this stuff. So he said, okay, you can be the executor. And so you want someone that you can trust, someone who's good with details, someone who's going to comply with the law, someone who's going to be good at keeping records and filing the appropriate things with court, and dealing with your estate lawyer.
Those are two
So
things that she just talked about. Who's going to care for the minor children if that's you happen to die young, and then either way, you're going to have an executor or executrix. I don't know why they.
yeah, so in Louisiana, they use the term executrix for a female executor, but most jurisdictions
Oh, is
just
that
use
why?
the neutral term
They also expect
executor.
you to do the dishes
Yes,
in
that's
Louisiana.
okay. That's okay. So anyway, so what does a will not do? You have a lot of assets that can be transferred outside of what we call probate. Probate's the court process of transferring your estate assets under a will. So if you have life insurance, that can be transferred through your beneficiary designation. If you have a brokerage account, a 401k account, an IRA account, that can be passed through a beneficiary designation. You have to make sure those forms are filled out. In most places, your bank account can be passed, your savings and checking accounts can be passed transfer on death or payable on death. It's TOD or POD. You'll see that. You have to go to your bank, go online, and you can fill out the form. So it's really important with your older relatives, if you're helping them out and helping them get their estate plan in order, to make sure that they have those beneficiary
It
designations.
just is a kind of a headache if you don't have
You
it. So.
might have, like John and I hold our bank account, we actually hold it in the name of our trust. But before we moved it into the name of our trust, we had our bank account as kind of joint tenants with right of survivorship. So if something happened to me, he would automatically inherit the entire account. If something happened to him, then I would automatically have the right to the entire
It's a
account.
tenant.
It's just a legal term.
Okay then.
It's not like a tenant in an apartment. It just means you both have the right.
You both,
Yeah, don't worry about it. It's just a
like
legal
we're
term.
husband and wife and have equal holdings in our assets, right?
So anyway, but thanks for asking. So, so where was I?
I don't know. We're
We're
talking
talking
about
about
how do you
things
actually.
that pass outside
All right,
of the
sorry.
will. So even
I'm
real
just being the
estate,
student here. I don't
even
know.
real estate, in most jurisdictions, you can hold real estate as joint tenants with right of survivorship. And so some people do that to avoid the probate process with real estate. But it's a good idea to check with your particular state. Louisiana has some wrinkles that I found out since I've been involved with my dad's estate, that they don't really have transfer on death or payable on death beneficiary designations. And with real estate, they don't have joint tenant with rights of survivorship. So this was a surprise to me when I started handling his estate.
It makes
Now,
everything just harder.
don't move it yet. We're still talking about this. Okay.
Okay.
So how do you execute and sign a will? Because you are transferring assets, and because the person whose property is getting transferred is now going to be dead when this will is being executed and carried out, you want to make sure that you've got witnesses. You can use potentially a notary, but it needs to be done in a careful way to satisfy the requirements in your state. So typically what happens is you're going to have two witnesses, and you're going to have a notary that states that they put a seal on the document, and they confirm that you are who you say you are. That keeps someone else from going and signing a document who isn't you and pretends to be you and creates a fake will. And so this is, kind of a big deal. The more money you have, the more likely it is that your will could be challenged by someone. And even with Marie, who was it that just died? Not Priscilla Presley, but her daughter just recently passed away. And she's got multiple children from different dads. And so it's kind of a complicated issue. And then she's got her mom has an interest in the estate, and she's got a trust, and they're kind of battling it out right now in terms of who's going to be the executor and who's going to be in charge of the trust.
So if you lay it all out, then the battle's over.
So you want to have something that's signed by two witnesses. Hopefully one or more of them do not inherit under the will. And you want to have it notarized by a notary public. And that's pretty easy to do. In California, we actually have a law that says notaries can only charge, I think, $10 per signature. And so you can go, we always go down to the UPS store that's by our grocery store, and they'll do it for us. Sometimes your bank will do free notary services for you, or a credit union if you belong to a credit union. So, okay, now you can go down.
There's our doggies.
Our dogs are helping. She's helping. She says, "Don't die, Mama. Don't die."
All right.
Okay. So keep going down.
Okay.
Keep going down. We already talked about joint tenancy with rights of survivorship. Okay, now we're going to talk about trust.
Because you talked about trust before.
Yes, in many places like California, people have trust because we have real estate that tends to be worth a lot more than other places, and our court system is pretty backed up and crowded and busy. So going through the probate process is slow and it's expensive. So the beauty of a trust is that you can pay up front legal fees and then avoid legal fees down the line. So John's mom had a trust. She had a home that she lived in with John's middle brother, and she moved the title of the home into the trust. So when she passed away, it was really simple. They went to an estate attorney. He filed the appropriate documents to get the deed of the house transferred into John's brother's name. And it was a matter of, a week or so to get this to happen. If they had to go through probate, it could have taken 6 months or a year or 2 years to get all this done.
And that's with a will.
That's with a will. So that trust was really helpful for them to transfer the property into his brother's name, which was really great. And so same thing for us, we have our house in our trust, and our two children. If John passes away, then I, get it. If I pass away, he gets it. If both of us are gone, then our children are backup beneficiaries. So as a lawyer, I always say, remember, you want to have multiple layers of protection. So you're going to have, for example, for our trust, I'm the beneficiary if John passes away before me, but then when I pass away, it's my two kids. So you're going to have multiple layers of beneficiaries in case something happens and you're in an accident, and
then with all of our retirement accounts, our bank accounts,
we have beneficiary forms. Yes.
Now, and when you kept saying that we have a will and a trust, so
yeah. So even though you have a trust, you're going to have personal property. You're going to have your cars. You're going to have some things that you haven't transferred into the name of the trust. We've transferred our bank accounts into the name of the trust, but you might have other property. So we have what's called a simple will. It's a pour over will, and that covers all of your property that
like
has
all of our paintings.
Yes,
and stuff like that.
Just stuff that we have. Our dogs, they're worth
my Academy
millions.
Award. So there's my Academy Award up there. So.
We call it his Academy Award because John got a Lifetime Achievement Award for teaching, well deserved, a few years ago. And when we went to the ceremony, you know how USC is, they do things like really well when they do these ceremonies. And they had all these people running around with headsets and microphones, and they would get you in line when it was your turn to go up on stage. And so it was like so really
Well
it
orchestrated.
was so really cool. And so we have the award hanging in our dining room because I'm super proud and I like to look at it all the time because he's amazing. So I'm sorry about the shoulder.
It doesn't, it hurts. I don't know. It is
Don't
so
you hate it
weird.
when you're
It
injured and
just
someone
means,
slaps you on the back
it
and
just
it
means I
hurts?
can't do anything. I can't go surfing now for I don't know how long, which makes me psychotic.
Yes, yes. Okay, so when you create a trust, our trust is a revocable living trust, meaning we've established it during our lifetime and we can change it if we want to. We could have an irrevocable trust, but we trust each other, so so that's why we have a revocable trust.
Irrevocable. Or
No, we
revocable.
have
Yeah,
a revocable
revocable. Okay.
trust.
All
If
right.
I
Sorry.
didn't trust you, like for example, if I was concerned that when I die, that John's going to take my money and run away to the Bahamas with some young, attractive person, then I might want to have an irrevocable trust. But I
Okay.
trust John, and if I'm
Okay.
gone, you should be happy and live your best life.
There you
So
go.
anyway, so you can have that trust. Go back up again. And it can be revocable or irrevocable, meaning you can't change it. You transfer your assets into the trust. We transferred our home, we transferred our bank accounts into the trust. We could transfer our cars, but I haven't done that because it's, I don't really care that much. And again, just like your will, you're going to sign it with two witnesses and a notary to make sure that that you can have people that can later, Lord forbid, if you end up in court, that could say, yes, the person was of sound mind, they weren't under any pressure, nobody was trying to force them to do this. And trusts are helpful, not just if you're like John and I, we bought our house in 1998. So we have a fair amount of equity in our home. But let's say we didn't have a lot of equity, but we had kids. It's great to have a trust because then your life insurance benefit can go into the trust and you can name someone to manage that trust for you
More rapid
for the benefit
transfer
of
of
your
money.
children. Because if your kids are underage, your life insurance check, the life insurance company is not going to want to write a check to a 5-year-old with your life insurance benefits. So then you're going to have to go to court and it's going to be complicated.
And that's why you go back to the will part where you designate who's going to watch over your kids if you pass. So.
Okay. So think about taxes. Taxes are important, especially in terms of transferring real estate. A lot of times people will say, well, my mom's going to transfer the house into my name. That's a bad idea because when your parent passes away and you inherit the house that way, you get what we call a stepped up tax basis in the property. So if you sold the property the next day, you would owe zero taxes because you'd have zero gain. And so if your mom transfers the property into your name before she dies, then you're going to have to pay capital gains taxes on all of the equity, all of the increase in value of the house from the time your parent bought the house to now. So usually in California, because that could be a lot of money, you don't want to do that.
And your property taxes stay the same as when you inherit the property taxes.
And so in California, and a lot of states have this rule to allow children to stay in the parental home, your property tax basis gets transferred to you. So John's brother, Tim, who lives in John's brother's
mom's house,
the house that John grew up in and his brothers grew up in, he still pays the same property tax amount, which is amazing in California.
So
it's like $1,000 a year.
So the value, because it's slowly, my parents bought the house for $15,000 back in the 50s or whatever it was, and yes, it gets reassessed, but its reassessed value now is probably 70,000. I have no idea what it is. So you pay property taxes based on 70,000, even though the market says it's worth 800.
Yeah.
So if you didn't do this right, then you would be paying property taxes on the value of 800, which is, something that would potentially kick the person out of the house because they couldn't afford the property taxes.
Exactly. So if you create a trust, you are the owner of the property that gets transferred into the trust. So you're the grantor. I am granting my property to the trust, or they sometimes call it a settler. The people that would inherit the property are called beneficiaries. Okay. You could have a trust that gives guardianship of your children to one person and control over the finances to another person. So maybe you have someone who would be great. Maybe you have a sibling that would be great to raise your kids, but you don't want to give them the money. And then you have another sibling that would be really great to handle the money, but they're not really that good with little kids. Then you can separate out those responsibilities. So, okay, annuities and retirement benefits. A lot of us who are older have the joy of having like a pension. So it's becoming much less
Or a
common.
401k, right?
But if you are a public employee, you might have, if you're an LA County sheriff, like John's brother was, you might have a pension through work. So you can name beneficiaries for your pension. And when you start drawing a pension, I have a previous job before I worked at USC where I get a small pension every month, and I started drawing it early because I'm pessimistic and I'm a cancer patient. So I was like, hey, I'm not going to wait for this money. And I signed up for a survivor benefit for John. That means that if I pass away, he gets almost the exact same amount of money, maybe $25 less a month than I get. And that was a really good deal because in his family, they lived to be, like 95 or 100. And so I love the concept that he could
Now,
potentially get this income stream for the next 30 or 40 years.
with every muscle that I have torn.
Yeah.
But
he may not be able to walk or move.
So
but...
with my brother's sheriff's pension, it gets passed on to the kids, but even after they're an adult at 18, or does that
Yeah. So you
end?
can name a beneficiary,
So
and it depends.
they still
It
get his
depends on your
pension.
pension plan who you could name as
I
a
doubt it, but
beneficiary.
yeah.
And his situation is a little unique because he's been married and divorced a couple times, so that complicates things. But anyway, make sure with any annuities or retirement benefits that you have through an employee benefit plan that you have named beneficiaries, and make sure that if you get married, divorced, have kids, or have any sort of life change, that you update those beneficiary statements. That's really, really important.
Okay, we're done with that, right?
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
So that's the complicated one, and then here's the one from ARP. I don't know if you want to go over this as well. But
the AARP thing. The thing I like about the AARP thing is, yes, if you can afford it and if you have access to an estate, a competent estate planning attorney, yes, you should go to an attorney. You should get a will drafted, depending on your state. In Louisiana, for example, a lot of people don't have trusts because the probate process is pretty easy and quick and inexpensive in Louisiana.
So this thing was obviously written during the pandemic, and that's why they have the seal on the legal document
is
with
the COVID. And a lot of us, we updated our trust, we updated our will, we updated our healthcare power of attorney, we updated our financial power of attorney during the pandemic because, I was concerned, what if I get sick and boom, I get a fever and I'm in the hospital 2 hours later and then I don't come out. So we wanted to make sure that we had all of our paperwork handled and everything organized.
So this article is providing some links to do-it-yourself type software.
Yeah, and so there are these options. If it's a matter of you're in your 20s and you have a couple kids and you don't have the time, the energy, or the money to go out and find an estate planning attorney, then yes, go online, use one of these options to do either a free or a low-cost will. And I think that's a really good start for a lot of people. Quicken even has a trust, and then there's a couple other websites you can go online and you can create a trust. And so just make sure that you follow the directions in terms of getting witnesses to sign it and getting it notarized. So I think that's a good option. I think a lot of people, a very high percentage of people, even people at our age, don't have their wills and trusts and estate planning in order. And so I think because there are these hurdles of trying to find an attorney and trying to get the money together and the time to do it, I think whatever you can do to get it done is important. Don't wait until you're sick or, with my dad, when he, towards the end of his life, he was having so many health issues. He was in and out of the hospital, and cognitively that affected him. And so it would have been a bad time for him to write a will. Thank goodness, because of my complicated family, he wrote his will like 15 years ago. And so there was no doubt that he was competent, that he was mentally okay, that there was no pressure. And so that he was able to put that together when he was still
these
physically and
highlights
mentally okay.
restate everything that she's already talked about. So we'll just go through that.
Yeah. And again, be thoughtful about who you pick to be your executor. That person is going to be in charge. Do you trust them? Do they know what your values are? Are they going to carry out your instructions? Are they going to cave? It can be in my situation, right off the bat, when we read the will with the attorney, my sister threatened litigation. She threatened to go to court. And so, that person needs to be a strong person that's going to stay calm and get things done and make sure that your wishes are carried out.
There you go.
Okay, let's talk about long-term care.
All right, are we done with this?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. And it's just a lot of great resources, so do check that out. Okay. All right.
So the discussions about long-term care. So what happens as you get older, and it can accelerate quickly. So you might have an older relative who's doing great. They're living on their own. They're paying their own bills. They're washing their own clothes. They're cooking their own meals. They're taking their own medication. And then all of a sudden, things start to kind of fall apart. Typically what I see is that older people, the first signs that maybe they need a little bit more support is they start having trouble managing their own medication. They start having trouble paying their own bills, and they may have falls. So they may become a fall risk for a variety of reasons. Maybe they're just, maybe they have cognitive issues. Maybe they have just mobility issues. It can be maybe they're sick and they're weak. And so all of a sudden you're in a situation of like, okay, I've got to figure out how to support this person. And if you don't have family that can move in and take care of them, or like my stepmom, who's a saint, took care of my dad and kept him at home right up until the very end, then you may be looking at long-term care, which can be assisted living, where you move into it's kind of like a college dorm where they provide you with food and they provide you with people that can come help you bathe and do your laundry and clean your little apartment for you. It might be a nursing home if the person needs skilled nursing care. A lot of people are looking at home care, so home health aides, home aides, which are basically babysitters for old people that can help manage medication and clean around the house and things like that.
The prior economics of aging section, we talked about the costs, and it's astronomical. And Medicare doesn't cover it except for a small period of time if you've been hospitalized and all these specifics that you have to meet.
Yeah. Now, Medicare will cover home health aides indefinitely. Mm-hmm. And so that is kind of an exception. Nursing homes, you've got 100 days that Medicare will cover. And then after that, you have to pay the full cost. So that is very difficult for most people.
But even home health aid versus home health care, right? These are different.
Yeah. Medicare doesn't cover a home, just a home aid.
And it's, and then I had some friends where the parents or grandparents were just such a handful. So they looked at long-term care facilities, and then they it was out of pocket, didn't have long-term care insurance, and it was costing them, upwards of $10,000-$15,000 a month, and they couldn't handle it. People, like I said, I was talking about the poor people next door. The cost was $400 a day for in-home care out of pocket, and it drains the estate so rapidly,
But most people do want to stay at home.
Yeah.
That is kind of a consistent theme that we hear from a lot of people. And so you'll hear doctors, and you'll hear social workers, and you'll hear people that are trying to connect you with resources. One of the first things that they do is they want to figure out, do you need help with activities of daily living? So activities of daily living are eating, dressing, bathing, getting dressed. I already said dressed, getting dressed, going to the toilet, transferring from bed to chair, being able to move around. So those are just like the basic activities that you need to be able to do to live independently. And so if you need help with activities of daily living, you might be a candidate for either a home, some sort of home health care, or an assisted living facility. If you have a bigger issue and you need skilled nursing, then you might end up in a nursing
And
home.
then there's
A lot
another
of
echelon called memory care units and things like that. So it's, it's really costly. And then you can speak to, so a lot of people hedge their bets in advance. You can't do it. You can't get a long-term health care insurance policy, long-term care insurance policy. Let's say you're 70, you're going downhill. You can't just go get an insurance policy. You're expected to pay into this thing for most of your life, and then ask the insurance company to help pay for things. And I don't know, it's not perfect, right?
No, it's not.
Yeah.
My dad had long-term care insurance, and I fought as an attorney who's teaches classes about Medicare, who used to work at an insurance company, and I'm pretty good at this stuff. I fought with his long-term care insurance company for a year, and spent hundreds and hundreds of hours with them, and at the
And
end of
they ended up paying maybe 5 grand worth of service
yeah. So
after he
it
spent
was.
probably 80 grand
Yeah,
going
yeah, yeah.
into it. So,
Yeah. And so the other sorts of things that older people need support with are things like getting transportation to the doctor, getting meals, activities. And so both both skilled nursing facilities and assisted living facilities will provide a lot of daily activities. So if you're interested in music or art or exercise classes, and those are to help people stay socially engaged and active, and to help them at least maintain the health that they had when they came to the facility, if not improve their health. And so there's a lot of really, really great things that happen with long-term care.
and this is where we, in some ways, if you think globally, at the community level, we rely on your willingness to volunteer and help out for people that can't afford it. And then a lot of you, and all your discussions talked about policy changes, and there needs to be more government support. So this is
Yes.
something to think about in the
As
future.
gerontologists, we are concerned that we have this aging population and we may not have enough employees to provide care. And so we've got to figure out ways to be more efficient and to recruit people into this industry. And so there's so much need there for long-term care.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the typical patient. So there's kind of two groups. There's the person who's declining, they're not going to get better, they've got age-related diseases, and they just need support, and they're not necessarily going to get better. So they may have a longer range need for long-term care. So that's the person that may go into assisted living, and then from assisted living after a year or two may end up in a nursing home and may stay in the nursing home until they pass away. Then there's the other person, like my stepdad, who he fell and hurt his hip. He actually had already had a hip replacement, but he needed to have the hip replacement redone. And after the surgery, he went into a rehab facility, a long-term care facility for a month or so until he was able to go back home. So you might have these people that have short-term needs, and those people are in pretty good shape because Medicare will cover about 100 days for each episode. So that's covered. It's not too bad, not too much of a financial burden. Who's usually in long-term care? Well, think about it. It's going to be older people. It's going to be people in poorer health. It's going to be women because they tend to live longer. And historically in the US, it's not unusual for a woman to marry a man who's a little bit older than she is. And then because women tend to live longer, the husband's passed away, the woman's on her own. Single people, so people that don't have children or close family members that can help take care of them in their homes. And one of the other things that we see with the U.S. is families scatter. So I'm living in California. My dad was living outside of New Orleans, Louisiana, and I was trying to manage his care from far away. And I was very, very fortunate that my stepmom was there, and she was the person that could take him to the doctor and could give him his medication. And then I would be on the internet dealing with the insurance companies and dealing with the doctors and pushing to get the treatment and the tests that he needed. Some people can stay in the home, like my dad. He had home health. He had a physical therapist, a wound care specialist, an occupational therapist, people that would come. And for, I think, most of the last year of his life, he had that type of care that would come every day or a couple times a week to help him. And he could have used more care than he got because with the pandemic, there is a shortage of workers. So, we really wanted someone who could come in and help him get dressed and help him bathe, and we were never able to find that person.
And the other issue is it's such a low-paying job, and so it's hard to, like Julie said, it's hard to recruit people into this profession. So we got to, as a society, change this definitely.
Yeah, yeah.
Make it a good career path because it's such an important thing.
So the other thing that's helping people stay at home is tech. So my stepdad lives in Florida, and he lives in a senior community in Florida, and they actually got a group deal on, it's kind of like that life alert thing where I've fallen and I can't get up and you push the button. So he's got something like that he wears on him so that if he falls, because he's fallen several times, he's a fall risk. And so if he falls, he's not going to be falling in the corner and, a lot of time goes by before somebody finds him. And he's lucky he has a sister who lives nearby, and he's active in his community, and he has caregivers that come and help him, during the day. And so he would not be someone who could fall and not be found for a week. But you got to really think about your relatives who are isolated and maybe don't have people coming in and out of their homes. Do they need that kind of tech where if they fall, they can hit a button? Is it supposed to do that?
No, sorry.
Okay.
Hey, you guys like that? That happens when
we're talking too much.
Yeah, when you haven't moved the screen.
Okay.
And I was petting Lucy.
Okay. It's easy to get
distracted.
Anyway, so let's go into the Genworth calculator. I just want to give you kind of the shock and awe scariness about how much all of this stuff costs. This is a cool website that they do a cost of care survey. So you can, for example, you can look at let's look at California, Los Angeles, and
California?
yeah, California's fine.
All
Just
right.
look at the annual cost.
All right. Let's scroll down here.
Okay, so California's expensive. Real estate's expensive. The cost of wages is expensive. Everything is expensive in California. So when we look at things like
all this, guys, is out of pocket.
Yes, when we look at assisted living facilities, and I think these numbers tend to understate because the assisted living facility, it says $63,000 a year. I guarantee you that's a little bit less than $6,000 a month. I guarantee you if you want laundry or medication help or help getting bathed or help getting dressed, it's going to be more than that. Nursing homes for a semi-private room, meaning you share your room with another patient, is almost $120,000. So what is that? About $10,000 $12,000 a month.
And then it's going to go up. And these are underestimates, like you said.
So now look at, for example, Texas or Louisiana.
Do we have to look at Texas?
I just want to make the point that the costs can vary quite a bit.
Went down.
So the nursing home cost is about half as much in Texas. Well, they have a lot less regulations. Land is plentiful and cheap. Their labor costs are much, much lower. And so,
cost of living, so to rent a home if you're an employee doesn't cost that much.
Yeah.
Whereas in California, we have to pay our employees more because they have to go home and find a place to rent.
And the most expensive places in the country, I think, are probably Hawaii, where you have limited resources. So anyway, it's kind of a cool calculator. It's kind of interesting.
I guess I can type it in, but I can, we can. It's kind of fun to use the map though. But I can just type in Hawaii.
See if it. Hawaii, USA, yeah. So Hawaii is probably going to, see, it's $150,000 for a semi-private room in a nursing home facility. Their assisted living is about the same as California.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure they're dealing with labor shortages, so they have to pay more. Land is very expensive in Hawaii. New York, I'm sure, New York, so the city of New York is $150,000 for a semi-private room. And so that, you know, depending on where you live, you're looking at a lot of money.
Anyway,
And so
kind of fun.
we've
Are we done with that?
we've got to figure out how we're going to deliver care when it's this expensive to older people. And I think it's gonna happen through a combination of multi-generational homes. So there are a lot of older people that if they just have someone that can manage their medications for them, they can still be useful and active and engaged. So I love the concept of multi-generational homes. I love the concept of communities that are built to be friendly to older people, so that the grocery store is very close, the pharmacy is very close, maybe there's a library or some entertainment space that's very close.
And this community arrangement, so just because you have multi-gen home, you know, you could potentially then tell somebody down the street, hey, you know what, I need to go do something for a couple of days. Can you look out for my parents? And, you know, if it's assembled right, that might be a
Yeah, so have
reality.
it be part of our culture that we
Yeah.
look out for each other. Having free transportation. I know in our area we've got some free transportation options for older people, so that if someone who's an older person who can't drive anymore needs to go to the doctor, or if they want to go to the senior center and play bridge or whatever, then they've got an option for transportation. So there's a lot of ways, including tech, including transportation, including age-friendly housing, that we can make this all better. So it's not all bad news, but it's a lot of bad news.
There's a lot of work
isn't it?
ahead of you guys, basically.
Okay.
That's what we've
Well,
kind of
anyway,
showed you.
thanks for hanging in. Thanks
All right.
for doing this in the summer. If you ever need anything, if you need a letter of recommendation for
You have any
future
questions
school,
about
grad
life?
school, yeah, if you need a letter, you need someone to be a reference for you, you can count on us.
If you ever rupture your biceps tendon, I'm part of the support
If
group.
you have any questions about sports injuries, John's your guy.
Me. All right, guys. Peace, and we'll
Alrighty.
see you
Great.
tomorrow.
There you go. Fight on.